Welcome back to the Fish Tank, presented by Van Horn Law Group and Casabella Design Group. Seth Levit and the toughest podcaster Dan Marino ever played with. He is OJ McDuffie. Juice. Training camp is here, and when you're not participating in it, you kind of like this time of year.
What do you mean? I mean, yeah, it's much better. It's much better where I'm at right now, Big Seth, and the air conditioning of my home, and being able to be on a microphone and just and get amazing reports instead of being out there even in person at times, man. So I'm happy where I'm at in life. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, you've earned that. You've definitely earned that. And another man who has earned the position that he's in, although he's a little bit of a rolling stone these days, come training camp. And this is a moment that we've been waiting for some time, ever since the Travis Wingfield episode, quite frankly. But for the first time ever, Kyle Krabs, or as we like to call him, KFC dives into the Fish Tank. He is in the building. Kyle, welcome to the Fish Tank, man.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little gassed up. So when I got the invite, I said, heck yeah, we're going to go dive in, and excited to talk a little Dolphins football with you guys.
A lot of Dolphins football.
Well, you know what's up, real quick, man. I need to go do my hair real quick, bro. Because if I'm going to be on here with Kyle, man, I need to get my hair right, bro.
I got mine right with a hat.
Yeah, that's smart move right there, man.
And I feel like it might be your only option too.
It's definitely my only
Kyle,
option.
definitely, we need to talk hair. I think there's like Houts, who's got great Dolphins hair in the that sphere, and then certainly Kyle. We got to talk about the hair. And as I'm just making the assumption that everybody knows everything about Kyle Krabs, and if you listen to this show, you're certainly listening to his, because I look at all of the rankings. If we ever fall into one, I think we're like in Finland and Honduras right now, and maybe Japan. But as I'm looking down for
some of those, killing in some of those.
We are killing it in Honduras right now, I think. But as I look down the rankings, I always see Locked On Dolphins first. And so kudos to you for the great work that you're doing. But so you are, man, you got a lot of titles, right? The host of Locked On Dolphins and Locked On NFL Scouting, the author of Touchdown Miami. You do NFL analysis for A to Z Sports. When do you sleep, my man?
I got 2 under 5 at home, so I'm used to no sleep. I've been sleeping like a baby in this hotel room.
Right, that's why he's on
the road. I might have to extend my stay another couple weeks just to get a little extra charge on the battery before I go home.
Too good.
How'd you pull that off, Kyle? Man, how were you able to get away? It's work, right?
Right. It's realistically this, outside of like the Shrine, the Senior Bowl, and the NFL Combine, this is the only time I leave the house. I work from home, right? Like I do a bunch of content creation. I got a home studio, so I have to pay the penance for it. I got to do those extra things off the honey-do list before I leave, and I had the kids all weekend before I got on the plane to come down, so I paid for it, but maybe my flight will get rained out or something, and I'll get an extra night. I don't know.
Rained out.
We'll have to see what the weather does for me.
It's possible down here, dog. You got a chance.
There's plenty, too much of that for sure. And first day of camp, there was some rain. There was some rain there as well. So you've been here in South Florida, Miami Gardens, each of the last 2 days. How much longer are you sticking around?
I'll be here through the end of the Saturday practice. So I'm going home Saturday night. I'm maybe coming back for the Jacksonville week with the joint practice with Jacksonville and the preseason games. So that's, again, I got to pay the penance. So we'll see if that comes to pass or not, but we'll see.
Not making any promises right now.
Yeah.
Carl, make sure you go back bearing gifts, man. You just make sure don't go back empty-handed. That's always key. And then as soon as you get back, you're not tired from the flight. You can't wait for her to get some rest when you get there.
Right. Yeah, just make up for lost time and give something that I picked up along the way to distract the kids, and we're right back in the swing of things.
That's
right. Too good.
We got down.
Too good. Some sage advice from OJ McDuffie there. well, in this evolution of the Fish Tank, Phase 4 that we're in right now, that we're afforded this opportunity to talk some camp and those things, and we can't wait to. Travis is typically our eyes and ears, and certainly when you're in town, you have become that as well. And so we're excited to ask you some questions because, Juice, have you been out? I haven't been out either the last 2 days. I've been running around with these students for careers in sports.
Right.
Well, we need to know what's going on.
Yeah. So, Kyle, right away, even before we got to training camp, there was this conversation about culture change within the Dolphin organization. And I don't know where the culture was before. I had an idea myself. What do you think about that whole conversation, and what do you think needs to happen with the team in terms of culture change to get to where I think Mike McDaniel wants his team to be, but I think where they need to be as a group?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line you have to walk, because I don't think Tigers generally change their stripes, and who Mike McDaniel is, I think that's who Mike McDaniel is. And is there some little things that can be adjusted along the way? Sure. But I think uh, the theory of being a player-led locker room and having the players be the conduit of the culture of the team, I think that's the right idea. I think when Miami kind of went through the last couple of years of this build, and player X is available and player Y is available, and you're pulling from all over the place, kind of you have a bunch of different ideas on what things are supposed to look like and how they're supposed to feel. And I think that's why when I saw the veterans that Miami brought in this offseason were guys that weren't superstars, guys that had roles to play, but also guys that had chips on their shoulder. And then they went from one of the oldest rosters in football to one of the youngest rosters in football.
Yep.
I could see what the objective was. And I will say the first 2 days of camp, they wrapped practice, they blew the horn 3 times, and they had the scrum, and the players did conditioning afterwards on their own. And like little things like that, like I can get down with that, because I remember that being a big measuring stick last year when Miami had their joint practices with Washington. And it was, well, they wrapped up practice and the Dolphins players left the field, and the Washington guys stayed out and did extra conditioning after the fact. So the players have alluded to it. It's kind of self-initiated for corrective measures for mental mistakes or things they didn't do right. And I think some of that is, hey, this is who we want to be, but the players who are at the forefront of it are the ones that appear to have bought in. And I think that's a nice start for all of this culture talk, but I don't think you're going to really know until the bullets really start flying.
Yeah. And so I guess building upon that, and I'm with you, like the concept of having a player-led locker room, ultimately that, that's what you want. You want guys that can lead, and the right guys that are leading. And that kind of rolls into, we heard the quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, yesterday, and he sounded, Juice, Travis, and I have this text thread that, man, it's great stuff, and we have a lot of different conversations and debates, and I don't ever say arguments, but it gets heated sometimes. But we also like to pick each other's brains. And man, I thought that Tua sounded like a guy who was a veteran quarterback who was a leader of the team in so many ways. And he was asked about Tyreek, and I was surprised that he said some of the things that he said in a public forum, but it was also really open and honest and mature. And I think we kind of heard some of the things you're talking about from the idea of a player-led locker room. And hey, and it's not that he's got to prove something to me. It's that there's a lot of guys that were a part of this thing last year, and he's kind of rebuilding that while he's also building on himself, working on himself. And I thought it was some interesting stuff, but it seems to, you clip out the right part of that, and all of a sudden now nationally we're getting this, is there tension in the Dolphins locker room? I didn't take it that way. Did you take it that way?
I didn't take it as tension, but I did take it as a message, a continued message. Right. It's that's not overly in character of Tua. He's generally a private guy and generally doesn't like to say too much. There's times he stuck his foot in his mouth, but and I think Tyreek needed to hear that from somebody in the public space. There's all the conversations that the Dolphins had with Tyreek was, oh, well, we had the conversations. It was kind of behind lock and key as far as the specifics. You heard people within the organization kind of allude to, we've had these talks, we're on the same page. But for Teron Armstead was really the closest one that came to it when they were doing exit interviews at the end of the year. And then for it to come into a new year, Tyreek saying all the right things, but then Tua as the quarterback to say and to go as far as he did with what he said, I think is a nice reminder that there are scars from this. And you can say all the right things from February through July, and that's fine. But it doesn't just, hey, we sit down and have lunch and it goes away, right? Like it's what is going to happen the first time you have 3 targets in a game that we win or lose? What's your attitude going to be?
Right.
And that's when I think, he's working on it, and that's when they will know what he's been working on and if he's authentic in what he's saying or not.
And really good stuff. And I agree with everything that
absolutely.
you're saying, but I also, want to ask, and maybe this is even more for you, Juice, but when Kyle says, I think Tyreek needed to hear that. First of all, I think you could only hear that from Tua or Mike McDaniel. I think if anybody else said it publicly, then all of a sudden it becomes a different conversation altogether. But what do you think about that, Juice, as a wide out? Like, if now granted you didn't ever come out and publicly say those things, but as a guy who led this team in receptions, a guy who was looked at as a team leader, if Dan Marino or Jay Fiedler, whoever had said, Juice needs to do X, Y, and Z publicly, when do you think it needs to be said in a public forum, and when do you think it just needs to remain a conversation amongst guys in the locker room?
Well, it sounds like it's been said privately a few times.
That's fair.
It really does feel that way, and I'll go back real quick, and I think another guy that might be able to talk to Reek is probably Waddle. I think Waddle can talk to Reek too. I think they have that type of relationship as well. So I wish, I just go back to the Jets game, and when Waddle was upset that Reek wasn't coming back in the game, and I think that for him to even speak out like that tells me that he has a way of talking Tyreek that a lot of people don't get that opportunity to. But for me though, I think publicly it's never it's never a bad thing if it's needed, like what we're talking about. Honestly, everything else has been done in terms of conversations, I think, with Tyreek. Tyreek's got to be a guy that, it's so crazy. I had this conversation earlier today. Tyreek's got to be a guy that you talk about the 3 catches or in a win or a loss. He really has to go out and meet Tyreek every single game. I mean, that's his job, really, to go out there no matter what. We talk about all the other great receivers out there, Kyle, and you can probably agree with this. There's game plans against all the great receivers, and they seem to get their numbers, seem like every single week, no matter what. I mean, and no matter what's going on. But for him, I think the whole thing about Tyreek being more engaged with everybody else about everything else that's going on in his life, that's kind of important because it's already out there. So for Tyreek, I mean, and Tua has to, be the guy that I saw Dan Marino yell at everybody. I mean, I don't know if yelling at everybody is the way to do it anymore, but because it's obviously not. But he didn't care who it was. But I think that's important that the head man, being Tua Tagovailoa on his football team, is able to have those conversations. And I hope Tyreek responds. We've heard this before. We'll see how he responds.
Fair enough. Speaking of responding, there's been a lot of talk about the cornerback position this offseason. I just read an article you wrote recently, Kyle, where you're kind of like, hey, here's 8 or 9 guys that are veteran free agents that have had some success in this league that, and a good number of them that are still looking for work and might be a good fit here. And we saw an injury in day one. We see Cornell Armstrong back again in Miami here. But I'm also hearing that the corners have kind of held their own. This young group of cornerbacks have kind of held their own for the most part at practice. I'm wondering if that is what you've seen. And I wonder if you still feel that they need to add a veteran guy, or is it starting to feel more like this might be the group that this team is going into the season with?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different prongs to this conversation. I would agree with the suggestion that the young guys have generally held their own. It's not like we've gotten through either one of the practices and it's like, wow, they couldn't cover anybody. Like we're in deep trouble. But I do think having somebody with a little bit more high floor as far as playing experience and having been a starter in the NFL, I think there's value on having another name like that you don't have right now because of all the young guys, whether it's Storm Duck and Isaiah Johnson as UDFAs from last year, or Ethan Bonner or Jason Marshall, who's a rookie this year, or BJ. It's like, Storm Duck's got the most career snaps out of anybody, not being Cater Kohu, and he played like 280 snaps last year. It's a really thin.
They seem to really like him though, Kyle. They seem to really like Storm Duck.
They do, and there's a lot there to work with. But I think finding somebody who has experience, but then somebody who's the right kind of personality, because I don't think it's a coincidence that it was names like Jordan Poyer and Deshaun Elliott that leave Miami and they have bad things to say, and then the Dolphins take a blowtorch to the entire secondary, right? I think there's enough commonality there for me to kind of say, hey, this was probably one of the groups where it felt like they had some problems. You have Jalen Ramsey, disobeying the Vic Fangio defensive scheme, however that incident played itself out, right? But the entire secondary from 23 minus Kader Kohu and rookie Cam Smith is gone, right? They totally reflushed the system. So I think having somebody that is willing to not just do a singular thing and has some variety to their game as far as inside or outside or zone or man, I think it does narrow the scope a little bit. And if you don't have that player available in free agency, I would rather you not force it and bring somebody else in here who gets paid and then has the expectation that he's going to get to do a certain thing, and it takes you away from what you've tried to achieve this offseason.
You know, Kyle, now we're talking a lot about defense, and we're looking at the second year under Anthony Weaver in this defense. And maybe that's part of the reason they didn't go out and make too many moves with guys with, high, bigger names and, high prices out there as well. So how are you seeing some of these guys now that they've been in the system for a year and some of the new guys coming in, the Cam Smith? Do you think that they have a better shot of being a better fit in that secondary because of, familiarity with Anthony Weaver's system, but also will he put them, do you think he'll put them in a position where they can be successful in doing what they do best and not, kind of forcing that square peg in the round hole when it comes to some of these guys in the secondary?
Yeah, I think the most interesting conversation I've had through 2 days of practice with anybody up in the stands was with Travis and John Congemi. And John was asking about the corners, and we were kind of brainstorming together, and the conversation kind of went to inadvertently. Last year, the corner interchangeability was Fuller was a guy who could play inside and outside, and Jalen Ramsey was a guy that they moved around a little bit, and Kader could play inside and outside. And you look at the depth chart, and I don't necessarily know that you have that, but what you do have is this really robust group of, they invested at linebacker and they invested at safety. So they looked at guys in the middle of the field. So we kind of worked our way through it to the point of kind of wondering out loud, I wonder if this interchangeability they went with at corner, maybe they will look more for guys who just, we want to have physical opportunities to kind of reroute guys either at the line of scrimmage or inside the contact window at corner, and a lot more of that telling lies with what our coverage shells are doing is the linebackers and their variety of skill sets that's new, and the safeties and potentially doing more 3 safety stuff. So I think when you think about the second year of the system and how the young guys can execute there, whether that's Storm Duck or somebody else, that's the way that my mind wonders is they very clearly have some level of confidence in a lot of the guys that were here last year. What can they do? And then what clues do we have with what other personnel moves they made that maybe kind of tell us how they go about doing the same things, but do it in a different way?
I also feel, we were texting about this as well. It's like, well, what's the plan at corner? The plan is that you've got 2 back, you've got 15 back, and you've got 44 with another year under his belt. And part of the plan is to put some damn pressure on the guy with the ball. Get home, get that ball out more quickly, get it out, and just be disruptive there, and it will make them better on the back end. So I don't know. It just seems to me like everything that you're saying makes so much sense. I do think they're way better at the safety position than they've been. I just don't think, I know everyone loved Javon Holland at one point and he had the cool nickname and he showed so much promise, but I don't ever think that it materialized in the way people believed that it would. And I said, Minkah Fitzpatrick is the best safety they've had since Minkah Fitzpatrick. And so even if he's not the guy that he was 3-4 years ago, getting all the all pros, I think you're going to have a hungry player that is a proud player that is still only 28 years old. It's not like the guy's on the wrong side of 30. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the secondary. But ultimately, and I know I have a pass rusher bias, Juice, but ultimately I think if those guys up front and then the big fellas in the middle can also kind of get you that push inside, that's the best thing that these corners have going for them, is that they have an opportunity to be a lot more stout up front.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And I will say that Thursday practice was the day that all three of those edge guys independently had stretches where they made themselves very felt. It was, it was a offense, defense, big showdown towards the end of practice. And Bradley Chubb has a big pass rush win, countering inside against Patrick Paul and forces a throwaway. And Jalen Phillips setting the edge in the run game multiple times, and Chop Robinson getting a quick win off and admittedly, I didn't really look at it on Wednesday, but on Thursday, I'm watching the defensive ends and outside linebackers do their indie drills. And it's like, man, I see 215 and 44 all at the same time. It's really sinking in for the first time that these guys are all going to be here for you at the beginning of the season with a little bit of luck. And it has the potential to be a very potent room. So I agree with that wholeheartedly too.
Yeah, and what about our big uglies inside, Kyle? I mean, we draft Kenneth Grant. Zach's got a new, outlook on life, I think, here. He's been great for us. And Benito, guys on the inside that, are doing the dirty work for those guys you're talking about on the outside to shine like you saw them shine today. Yeah,
I think one of the cooler things of the first 2 days has been watching Zach. And there's been moments where he has independently worked with two of the rookie defensive linemen about combination block. And you can see he's kind of working through the hand fit and how he applies pressure, and then how he splits the pair of blockers, and like them working collectively. And that, in addition to what I think is one of your best defensive or one of your best coaches on the coaching staff, is the defensive line coach, and kind of how their player development in that regard. Benito Jones had the best year of his career. Deshaun Hand had the best year of his career. What Zack Seiler has become, you've had some consistent player development there, and I think player development is one of the big storylines of the season for Miami.
It's a great point.
So to see Zach have his hand in that, and then to see Austin Clark, the defensive line coach, have a chance to impress on these young guys. And I really liked Kenneth Grant's. He's a top 15 player for me, so I thought they got good value when they drafted him. And I loved Jordan Phillips, the 5th-round kid from Maryland, as far as just a refrigerator with arms and an all-state power lifter and wrestler. It's exactly what you want for a guy who could play on the nose, but then can also kick out and play odd front end and really win the line of scrimmage for you. So I think he's a big-time potential guy for him, and I'm excited to see how he kind of grows. Although a couple of Penn State Nittany Lions like OJ and myself probably might have a little smack talk to say for him being Maryland Terp when it's all said and done.
You know it. You damn right we will.
Can't all that stuff be put aside once it's, when they put on the aqua and orange, and I even said it right for you for that, to make that point.
It took me and Marino, that Penn State thing didn't work out for weeks, it seemed like, Big Seth. I had to return a punt, in that opening preseason game for Danny to even acknowledge me at times. So, yeah, we'll see, right, Kyle?
Well, you guys worked it out eventually. You definitely worked it out. So we spent a lot of time talking about the defensive side of the ball. And I want to talk about the offense really quickly, not really quickly, but really quickly. I do want to ask you about Zack Seiler. I saw his presser today. Is there anything that guy has done since he's come down to Miami that isn't what you want in a football player? I mean, everything he said today, everything that he has represented since he got here, it's just a guy that seems to have done literally everything the right way. I think I heard your voice in one of the questions that was asked of him. He was no nonsense, but he was also grateful. I think he's anticipating being. It was funny to hear him say, what I feel I deserve, what I know I deserve. He kind of corrected himself, and he feels, and I don't think anybody would argue with him. And I don't want to speak for them because I certainly haven't had any conversations, but I imagine inside of the building, they all agree. And it's just a matter of figuring out what that should look like. but damn it if that guy hasn't done everything the right way since he's gotten here.
He finished talking, and I kind of said to myself, that was like the that was my takeaway on Locked On Dolphins today. So the Zack Seiler press conference was the quintessential how you handle a press conference in the midst of a contract negotiation with class, grace, dignity, pride. Like he stood up for himself, but he also didn't dump on any guys that have handled their situations differently. He didn't dump on the team. I was like listening to it unfold, and I said, let me ask him a football question. So I went out of my way to ask him a football question, which he kind of gave me a pretty animated answer for, which I'm
sure he was thrilled to actually talk balls.
Let me not ask him a 13th question about his contract situation. But you're right, as far as just a guy who was a late round draft pick and a waiver wire claim and the way that he's developed himself. And my question was really rooted in, for all of the talk about 2 double-digit sack seasons, I think he's just as good at setting the table for other guys when they run twists and stunts and games up front. And I asked him about that chemistry and what that's like for when you're running a pick stunt for somebody else, and the anatomy of winning those games up front. Because I can't tell you the number of times where he's picked the center and either parlayed off of it and got a sack for himself, or he knocks the center down into the guard and clears this gaping hole for Emmanuel Ogbah, Calais Campbell, or Chop Robinson to come screaming through a wide open gap where they don't have to gear down to fit through the crease because Zach blows it open. So he's an unselfish player on the field, unselfish player off the field, bought in totally. He's been developed here. He handles press conferences the way that he does. It's exactly the kind of guy that's a model for everything that I think that you want organizationally.
Yeah, 1,000%, as my partner would say.
You know how to say it, Big Seth. That's very fascinating.
It is fascinating too. We have these buzzwords. You're working with each other for as long as we have been. We definitely like to tease each other. So Juice also loves to say that the right side of the ball is the offensive side of the ball. I'm shocked that we've gone almost 30 minutes. Well, we did talk a little Tua earlier for sure, but and I was trying to think where on the offense I wanted to start, and I want to start here. Darren Waller. Mm-hmm. Do we care that he's on PUP right now? Do we, when the terms of his contract, and I don't like to talk about people's money, but when the terms of the contract came out, I heard you say how it was about as low risk as it could be. I think you even had and I don't get really in the nitty gritty of salary cap, but you said adding him maybe put you $1 million over what it would have been if he was never here at all. Like, it was just almost, it's almost inconsequential from a financial investment. Mm-hmm. And if for some reason it doesn't work out and they have to cut bait, that it doesn't really hurt them on the books. My question is, do we care on the field? Forget about the money side of it. From an X's and O's perspective, I know people got really concerned when Jonnu was traded because he was so prolific in the pass game last year. But when you look at the overall numbers of the way the offense performed, Jonnu's success did not translate into the offense's success, the offensive running optimally, the team winning games. I'm not blaming that on Jonnu. He did what he was asked to do. But are we maybe better off with it is more Julian Hill, or if it is just more footballs going to guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting contrast between how teams play the Dolphins and how teams are playing everybody else because of the speed that the Dolphins have, where so much of the league right now is, from a pass defense perspective, is zone match, where you are dictating your coverage responsibilities based on how guys are releasing into space in the first 3 steps, right? And if he breaks out, then so-and-so is responsible for him. And if he gets vertical, then the guy in the seam is going to carry him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when teams play the Dolphins, they get a little bit more country zone, the old school zone, where we're covering areas of the field instead, because that's how this offense operates. And I think what you saw last year for Jonnu when it wasn't some of the manufactured touches that were replacing the run game because they couldn't run the ball last year. Once, Alec Ingold gets banged up and Austin Jackson goes down. And I thought Kendall Lamb did an amazing job last year stepping in, but his strength is really as a pass protector as compared to a run blocker. And you saw that they didn't get that same movement on the front side of plays. Jonnu was benefiting from sit routes over top of the ball, right? It's we're going to run our routes and then I'm going to release and I'm going to get up over the center and I'm going to turn around at 8 yards and I'm going to be available. And everybody's playing us way soft and they're playing us way deep and they're playing country zone. And Jonnu would catch the ball, he'd turn around and get another 4 or 5 yards. And you get a really healthy gain. And you say, okay, we could stay on schedule. Yeah. So I think the degree of difficulty of that role in the passing offense, that should theoretically be there. And I think Darren can assimilate himself to a lot of that fairly quickly. It's that they're not the timing routes in holes in deeper areas of the field that you really have to thread the needle and hit a guy in stride like we saw so often in 23 with 10 and 17 when Tua was ripping him the ball, right? It's you've got a bigger margin. So I'm not overly concerned that Darren's, however long his ramp-up period is going to put him at a detriment in that regard. But I do think for Darren, I am sensitive to Tua last year talked about the time on task with the guys, and it was through the lens of Odell Beckham and that being an important thing. And you saw how not in sync Odell Beckham was with the Dolphins offense last year. So
that was telling.
It is in
That's
the
a
back
great
of
point.
my mind.
Right.
That's a great point.
Well, Kyle, we need to be in sync offensively, and you know where it always starts, man. Let's talk about those 5 big uglies up front or 5 to 7 big uglies up front, and what your expectations are for them. You talked about Patrick Paul. You talked about one rep today. How are some of the other reps? You talked about Austin Jackson, his loss in the run game. We know we hit a home run with Aaron Brewer. I think we got some other guys. Talk about that. Those big guys that you saw. And what do you expect? Not what you saw today, obviously with no pads and things like that. But what do you expect from the guys up front that we didn't get from them last year?
Yeah, I think. I think you have a much broader menu of ways in which you can play. And I don't know this, but I think it did not take long last year for them to kind of see how the bet that they placed with the offensive line was going to pay off, and the ways in which it handcuffed what they were able to do. And I don't think their actions this offseason are a coincidence in that regard, where their biggest offseason investment was James Daniels in free agency. Their biggest draft investment might have been Kenneth Grant because of where that pick was scheduled, but they gave up the only other day 2 pick that they had to go up and get Jonah Savaiinaea because of the conviction that they had. Like they are very heavily invested in both of those players. So I think I look at that and I consider, well, now you've added Daniel Brunskill and Larry Borum in some of the same ways has the same stigma that Aaron Brewer did before he got here, is we can't pass protect, and sure, he's athletic, and Larry's obviously a much bigger player, but he was playing in Chicago for guys holding the ball for 3.6 seconds like the last 2 years. Like, of course he's going to give up some sacks. I think he's a great fit for what this offense aspires to do as a utility offensive lineman with swing tackle capability who's played inside and outside. So they went for guys with a lot more mass, but did not compromise in the way of athletic and dynamic ability. And I think that's going to allow the outside zone stuff to be a little bit more effective. I think it's going to allow them in short yardage situations with the bigger backs that they brought in to potentially earn hard yards and muddy yards a little bit more consistently. And we know how big of a pain point that's been for them. So I would not be surprised if the run percentage is up, and I think that makes the whole offense better if that's indeed how it plays itself out for them. But it was really exciting to listen to Patrick Paul today talk about him and Jonah. He said, Jonah and I were in the building, in the facility every day this summer getting ready for training camp. We are working on that chemistry.
I love that.
So that we can be as one. And like, Pat's a really intelligent dude. It doesn't take long talking to him to pick up on it. And for him to articulate what he was talking about, how they went about their business, I don't know how consistent Pat's going to be pass protecting on 3rd and 8, right? But I do know that the traits and the preparation and the praise that he's earned from Teron Armstead as far as being ready for this opportunity, I feel good that he's not frequently going to make the same mistake twice.
I mean,
I love that.
Seth, did you see how Patrick looked today? Like, did you see that specimen?
Oh
Kyle, what a specimen, bro. Like, yeah. I mean, my goodness. I mean, guys that size back in the day, they didn't look that fit and swell. You know what I mean? It's like, I just look forward to seeing what he learned from from Armstead, and I also look forward to seeing how the youth can be used in this situation where he's going to be out there every single day. He was there every single day in the building. All that stuff happens. It becomes contagious to a lot of guys. That work ethic is unbelievable. So I'm excited for those guys. Now, here's the thing about having these linemen that you love. Now, you say some guys that are pretty physical, pretty tough guys. Will the run game change because of this? You think Mike will dedicate some more effort into obviously the zone read stuff, but then maybe a couple things between the tackles?
I think he has to, right? Yeah. I think you look at some of the other coaches that are off of the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree and what their individual evolution for their teams has been like, whether that's Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota and the way that they invested in 2 of the 5 starters off the Colts offensive line in free agency this year, and they gave Will Fries like $84 million. You look at Sean McVay and the Rams and how they got to the Super Bowl with a very wide zone reliant offense, and then New England flooded all the gaps at the line of scrimmage and they didn't have an answer. And then they went out and got these 330-pound maulers like Kevin Dotson, and they draft Steve Avila in the 2nd round, and they signed Jonah Jackson in free agency to a $16 million per year contract, and they're heavily invested in guys so that they can do more duo and inside zone and have that mashing ability with their offensive line. And it kind of evolved how their play action mechanics were off of it as compared to the boot action stuff, because everything's a little bit more downhill. But there's a lot of examples of coaches off of this tree that they try to do it the way that Shanahan did it, and then eventually it's like we kind of have to diversify a little bit. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you ran up against it and you tried to squeeze a little extra blood out of that stone last year with your philosophy on the offensive line, and it imploded on you, right, and you saw the pivot. So I do think it kind of leads towards that being, we can't just be the outside zone team. We have to have that downhill element. And I think the actions that they've made on their offensive line, and with some of the physical skill players that are known as blockers and the big backs with Ollie Gordon and Alexander Madison, I think that all leads down that path. It's just, okay, we just need to see it.
So, Kyle, you're saying we can be under center on 3rd and 1 and 2nd and 1 and 4th and 1. We can go in the center a little bit.
Can be or will be, Juice. Did you say can be or will be?
I'm saying a little bit of both. Can be. We can.
Can be. And we don't have to run fullback belly with Alec Ingold to try to convert it either, like they did 2 times a game for the first month of the season last year.
Right. When it worked, it was great, though. I love when my man Alec gets to touch the rock, for sure.
He's no Lusaka Polite, but
no, very few are. Very few are. So, look, we could sit here and do this for another hour. We would probably love it, but we don't want to take away your entire evening because you probably have like 7 more shows to do. But I just, okay, not so bad. Then I want to know, when you came down here, you had to have expectations, right? You had certain things you were expecting to see or hoping to see. And I want to know what thus far has lived up to those expectations. And then what have you seen in these first 2 days, that has surprised you thus far, good or bad?
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me the most, it happened today, and it was twice in the final 20, 25 minutes of practice. They cut the music, and Mike stepped in between the offense and the defense, and he really revved everybody's engines up as far as, like, we're going at it and, like, getting guys hyped up. And it's that's a little thing for, like, maybe Mike's done that in season, but not any as a part of the practices that I've been a part of, to see him kind of, hey, everybody stop and listen, because this is what's on the line right now. Right? Are you going to execute, or are you going to execute? And really take that extra moment to kind of impress the competitive dynamic. And I think that's the kind of thing, just like players initiating the conditioning after practice. It's the kind of thing that's a little tweak. It's a subtle thing. But that was the big thing that when I recorded on Monday before I got on the plane to come down on Tuesday, I said, it's how you do anything is how you do everything. And I want to know what kind of subtle tweaks we see that suggest that there's follow through beyond just the talk.
Right.
And that was the surprising thing for me today, was for Mike to take that initiative to step in and force everybody to stop, listen, get after it, because this is what we're doing. So I enjoyed that from Mike.
I love that. And, that goes back to what we talked about at the top of the show. We were like, look, Tiger's not going to change its stripes, or it can't. And certainly it's hard for that to happen authentically. But that's an example of an impact that can be made that does feel organic and authentic, and isn't somebody trying to be something
forced.
that they're not.
It's not forced.
It's a coach stepping in. And what player on that field isn't used to a coach stepping in and having something to say and trying to, like, that's football, and it's what you anticipate.
We love competing, Big Seth. You give me talents like that, especially towards the end of practice, Kyle. It's like everybody's like kind of dragging ass a little bit. What are you going to do to bring this thing home today?
I've seen wide receivers try to do that, Juice, in the field. So,
Oh, yeah. Well, I got beat up trying to do that, but it happens,
But it rallied the troops. It definitely did. Too good. So, Kyle, I want to end with this. Travis Wingfield, the guy the glue that I think brings the three of us here together. You, I don't know, take the baton, you follow in the footsteps of, so Travis is the locked on guy. Mm-hmm. It sounds like Travis had a job that you had beforehand. That's where the KFC, for anybody who's wondering what KFC is, earmuffs for the kids, I'm sorry, but it's Kyle fucking Krabs, right? That's how you're known among these parts. And it goes back to when Travis was on the fish tank. And it was a funny story that he told, how you guys have always somehow been aligned in one way or the other. What is it like to take the reins? What was it like to take the reins? Because it's been years now from Travis, who I think did a brilliant job with Locked On. I think he did, I don't just say it because we worked with him, but he is, I think Drive Time is probably my favorite Dolphins podcast, but you kick ass as well. What is it like to try and I got to develop my own thing, but I also want to maintain the standard that Locked On is supposed to be, but it's got to be authentically Kyle. What has that been like over the last handful of years?
Yeah, I would say Travis effectively forced me to take that job. When he left for Miami, he's like, I am so proud of what I built, and you are the only person that I would trust to take it.
Don't mess this up.
Call David, please. And I, when he first reached out, I was like, my cup is full. I'm doing draft coverage. I'm doing written stuff for the Dolphins. We're making ends meet and able to live comfortably and starting a family. I'm not really thinking about it. He's like, just please call David. So I'm like, all right. So I called David and we tried it, and I enjoyed it so much that I left the writing Dolphins piece to do just my Dolphin stuff with Locked On. Right. So it has been a really fun opportunity to, Travis and I see a lot of the game the same way, but when we do disagree on stuff, that's when I have my most fun conversations with Travis.
Yeah,
and
likewise.
When I find out what some of those things are, I always enjoy checking the comments on the show to see who was like an OG indoctrinated by Travis in this regard versus who's in step with me on it. So, it's been a great blessing, and I consider Travis one of my closer friends, and to do proud for him with what he built and what he was able to do for himself with that platform. I took that responsibility very seriously, for all jokes aside, for the competitive nature of who got what job when we were angling for him. It's been the most, I do not consider myself having to work a day in my life when I do Locked On Dolphins, because I could do what we're doing right now. Like you said, like I could talk with you guys for another hour and not blink. And so the hardest thing about Locked On is they say 33 minutes is your cap. You go beyond that, we can't run it on our streaming services. It's a problem. We want to have all our content on there. Do not go longer than 33 minutes. I'll look down at them at 29:30 and I'm like, I had another segment. I was ready to go. I don't know. I got to go.
Yeah, we don't have that problem in the tank.
Right. That's right.
Okay. Well, that's all nice. But grind the damn tape right now, right, Juice? Like, tell us what you're better at than Travis, and what does Travis do better than you?
I think Travis gets honeypotted by certain traits for guys. He likes separators, I think, a little too much. He doesn't care if you're tiny, and there's spot for tiny guys at certain spots, right? But you got to build a wide receiver room like a basketball team, right? You can't have 5 point guards out on the field at the same time. And every time Travis texts me about a college kid and he's a wide receiver, the first question I ask him is, what's his 40 and what's his size?
Right.
And Travis, I'll be darned if they're not all a bunch of 5'9.5", 180s that run 4.38. And it's like, Trav, come on, give me a Nick Westbrook-Akine one of these times, please. I'm telling on myself here a little bit. I know the primary objective, Juice, I might offend you here. I know the primary objective of wide receivers is to get first downs and catch the football. I would much rather start my wide receiver watch on their run blocking rail. Because I want to know.
I can agree with that. Yeah.
When you're not the first progression.
2 Penn State guys.
When you got to dig it out, when you got to come down and dig out that safety who's fitting in the D gap, how do you do? I want to know what kind of fire you got in your belly and stuff like that. And Travis, he likes the long ball. He likes the deep posts. He likes the corners. He likes the slot fades. And I don't blame him. But that's the grinding the tape, tail of the tape on wide receivers and Travis versus Kyle.
Well, he does like Malik Watson inside, grinding it up a little bit. So that's one of the guys
he's
he
tough.
likes.
He's a tough dude, man. I got big expectations for Malik as far as I thought the way he developed as a route runner. Juice, there's some really nice nuance. He had one against the Jets, and he had another one. I think it was against the Rams where he was running a skinny from the slot, and he nods his head outside at the top of the route, and then he bumps off with a half step, and when he breaks his head back inside, the ball's right on his inside number, and it was that extra head move with the extra step outside to set it up to break the stem, and it gave him the separation that he needed to have that catch point window. And little nuanced stuff like that as a rookie and developing it with a timing, precision-based quarterback like Tua, like I think that kind of stuff's really cool.
Yeah, you can tell that there is a developing a rapport there because, we've seen guys in our locker room for years that don't get on the field. And he got a lot of opportunities last year, and that's big. That speaks volumes about his knowledge of the game for one, but his ability to do some of the things you're talking about, right? Not only just returning kicks, but he was getting in the offense. I was just returning kicks at the beginning, but he's getting offensive burn like early in his career, which I like a lot.
Says a lot about him. He's an easy guy to root for, man. He just seems another guy that seems to do everything the right way.
Man. Tough.
Yeah. So you're staying here through Saturday. What do you hope to see over the next couple of days at training camp? What are you going in there focusing on?
Yeah, I think I've decided when they have the depth units out, and I won't say ones and twos, but you kind of know, right? When they have the depth units out, I'm watching broad pictures right now, and I kind of want to really get a sense for where's the depth, where do you have guys that are making plays in the deeper units on the field as compared to when the ones are out there. Yeah, I'm watching Jonah Savaiinaea versus Kenneth Grant really close to kind of figure out like how are those developments going, what's that progression look like. I think it's a little, my window this year being down is probably a little too early to get a feel for schematically what they're going to do. So I've kind of let that ship sail, and I'll let the preseason give me my context clues there on what they're going to look like this year from an X's and O's standpoint. So when it's the ones or the perceived ones, I'm looking at individual matchups for guys that I think are high leverage guys. And then when it's not the ones, who's popping? How many guys are popping? Because you hear a lot of different opinions on the depth of this roster. And I think they have a pretty decent amount of depth in a number of spots. Now they have some holes at the top of position rooms, and the trickle down effect of that is maybe you feel like those rooms are a little incomplete, but
right.
That's I really want to get a feel for the safety depth. Like I'm really excited about Trader and McMorris as guys that are kind of cut from the same cloth. But
you've loved McMorris since day one, I think.
Yeah, there's smart dudes that tackle and fit the run, and they don't play a lot of rangy stuff on the back end, but there's room in today's NFL for guys who are intermediate safeties that are maybe a third safety. And I want to know which one of those guys steps up and shows up. I want to know how much progression Malik Washington has, or how big of a growth you have from Jalen Wright in year 2, and how consistent he is in reading the zone runs to make the cutback lane, where I thought that was the biggest hole in his game last year. A few too many times where we just kept pressing outside and we didn't have it. It's like, man, you peel back 2 more gaps and you're going to see the seas parted for you to have a big chunk run for you. So that's the kind of stuff I'm just looking to see based off of what we knew versus what this year can tell us for opportunities for guys.
Well, we can't wait to see if you find those things over the next couple of days. You can hear all of that on Locked On Dolphins. Not that I need to promote it because you're kicking everybody's ass with your show there. Or obviously follow him on Twitter, Kyle Krabs with 2 B's. Don't add the effing thing just because we do. It's Kyle Krabs with 2 B's. Kyle, this was a lot of fun, man. Appreciate you spending some time with us.
I had a blast with you guys, and I look forward to catching up with you both again soon and getting ready for this season here. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for finally diving in, Kyle.
Yes, sir. You know.
We are, boss.